Who was the first Prime Minister of New Zealand? The answer is C. Henry Sewell. Who was the first President of Austria? The answer is B. Michael Hainisch. Who was the first Prime Minister of Norway? The answer is a Johan Sverdrup. Who was the first President of Finland? The answer is a Carlo Juho Stolberg. Who was the first Prime Minister of Iceland? The answer is B. Hans Hafstein. Who was the first President of Portugal? The answer is Manuel de Arriaga. Who was the first President of Colombia? The answer is Simon Bolivar. Who was the first Prime Minister of Greece? The answer is Ioannis Kapodistrias. Who was the first Prime Minister of Sweden? The answer is Louis de Geer. Who was the first President of Lithuania? The answer is Antanas Smetana. Who was the first President of Poland? The answer is Gabriel Narutowicz. Who was the first Prime Minister of Denmark? The answer is Adam Wilhelm Moltke. Who was the first President of Hungary? The answer is Mihaly Karolyi. Who was the first Prime Minister of Belgium? The answer is B. Charles Roger. Who was the first President of the Czech Republic? The answer is Václav Havel. Who was the first Prime Minister of Romania? The answer is Babu Kotarju. Who was the first President of Bolivia? The answer is Antonio José de Sucre. Who was the first Prime Minister of Thailand? The answer is Apridi Banimyong. Who was the first president of Chile? The answer is B. Manuel Blanco Encalada. Who was the first Prime Minister of Malaysia? The answer is Tunku Abdul Rahman. Who was the first president of Singapore? The answer is Yusof Ishak. Who was the first president of Zambia? The answer is Kenneth Kaunda. Who was the first president of Botswana? The answer is Seretse Khama. Who was the first president of Tunisia? The answer is Habib Bourguiba. Who was the first Prime Minister of Algeria? The answer is Ahmed Ben Bella. Who was the first Prime Minister of Libya? The answer is Mahmoud al-Muntasir. Who was the first president of Senegal? The answer is Leopold Sedar Senghor. Who was the first Prime Minister of Jordan? The answer is Tawfiq Abu al-Huda. Who was the first Prime Minister of Lebanon? The answer is Riyad al-Sol. Who was the first Prime Minister of South Korea? The answer is C. Jiang Taixang. Who was the first president of Cuba? The answer is Tomás Estrada Palmar. Who was the first Prime Minister of Singapore? The answer is Lee Kuan Yew. Who was the first President of Ireland? The answer is Douglas Hyde. Who was the first Prime Minister of Israel? The answer is David Ben-Gurion. Who was the first Prime Minister of Sri Lanka? The answer is D.S. Senonaioki. Who was the first President of Cyprus? The answer is a Makarios 3. Who was the first president of Syria? The answer is a Shukri Quartly. Who was the first president of Uruguay? The answer is B. Juan Lindolfo Cuestas. Who was the first president of Venezuela? The answer is a Cristobal Mendoza. Who was the first president of Croatia? The answer is a Franjo Tuman.